It's all quiet in the underground bunker. Doors closed, locks bolted. But the Great One isn't just resting on his laurels. He's making sure your weekend is even better by giving you his best. This is the best of Mark Levin.
I want to thank you. I spent several weeks here, and now they've exposed themselves. That is, individuals who have glommed onto the MAGA movement, Donald Trump's movement, to try and hijack it, to try and grift off it, to try and whore themselves as a result of it. And we've exposed them. You and I. We've exposed them. Most of them are anti-American, while they keep talking about America first. Israel's winning this war that started Friday evening as we were on the air here. It's only Monday evening. They have fought a spectacular war thus far. Not a single American soldier has been involved in any direct way, firing bullets or having bullets fired at them. Thank God. And yet the fake MAGA that has spent years lying to you, deceiving you, separating you from your money, they're very upset tonight because their team, the Islamo-Nazi regime in Tehran, is losing. They have coddled these regimes in the Middle East. They have coddled a war criminal, Putin. They want you to believe that patriotism is isolationism, even in the face of a country, a regime like Iran, that has killed 603 American soldiers, that has maimed thousands of American soldiers, and then fake MAGA is telling you that they stand for the United States military. While they're undermining the United States military and our assets that have been placed throughout the world, not just the Middle East, throughout the world. Many of our military assets in the Middle East have nothing to do with Israel. Chatsworth Qatarlson, his favorite murderous monarchical regime, has the biggest United States base in the Middle East. He hasn't said that ought to close down. He hasn't said we ought to withdraw our troops and our jets from that base. No, he's busy wet kissing the dictator monarch of Qatar, which has funded Hamas, which gave aid and comfort and cover and safe haven to the mastermind of 9/11 when our FBI was about to nab him. The Qatari monarchy gave him a passport and a plane out of the country. A year or two later, he attacked us on 9/11. Chatsworth Qatarlson sucked up to that monarchy and that regime. And he wants you to believe he's America first. And he wants you to believe he cares about the cops and the firefighters. They died in those towers. He wants you to believe he cares about our military when he could care less. He hasn't called for the closure of the main base in Qatar, has he? That's our biggest base. We have a base in Iraq. Israel didn't put the base in Iraq. That base in Iraq isn't there for Israel. When we went to war with Iraq, we put the base in Iraq. So why are they focused on Israel, fake MAGA? Because most of them are Jew haters and anti-Semites. And most of them are America haters. Not all, but most. Starting with Chatsworth Qatarlson. How do they support our troops? By telling them they're not needed? Is that how they support our troops? I don't think so. These guys are thugs. When you challenge them in a substantive or intellectual way, they try to smear you. So you got to get down into the gutter and duke it out with them. And what President Trump sees, what I see, what more and more people see, is that these people are not only paper tigers, they're loathsome, absolutely loathsome. They have nothing in common with you. Chatsworth Qatarlson is a trust fund baby from the Swanson frozen food dynasty. He went to prep school. He's got a preppy, sort of effeminate way about him. The way he speaks and the way he laughs, the way he carries himself. But he wants to be a regular guy, you see, so he shows up at UFC events. Regular guy. Tough guy. His team is losing. So he trashes Donald Trump. Those of you who voted for Donald Trump, those of you who support his policies, those of you who want to defeat the Democrats and the left, he does not. Because now he's trashing Donald Trump. It was only a matter of time. So are the comedians that surround him and his ilk. Comedians that aren't funny, that don't even tell jokes. They just are a joke. And most of them have never lifted a finger for this country. And I don't even mean in battle. I just mean in even supporting our troops. Supporting our cops, supporting our firefighters. How have they? When you are defending a regime in Iran, they're not just opposed to quote-unquote war. They are defending right now the regime in Iran. The regime in Iran is about to fall in a few more weeks if the Israelis are left to finish them off. But they think they have a lifeline in Chatsworth Qatarlson. They think they have a lifeline in the jokes of these comedians who are podcasters. We have a young generation of people who happen to be among the most patriotic in the country. They feed on them. They lie to them. They sell them hate for their own country, for our military, for Jews. And notice there aren't evangelical Christians among them either. Have you noticed that? The vast majority of evangelical Christians and evangelical Christian leaders, like my dear friend Pastor John Hagee and so many others, they don't stand with these reprobates. They want nothing to do with these reprobates. I'll tell you why. Evangelical Christians and people of good faith all over the world, and especially in this audience and in this country, they love the Holy Land, and they know what will happen to the Holy Land. They know what will happen to the birthplace of Judaism and Christianity. They know what will happen if the Islamo-Nazis have their way. The things I tell you, the things we talk about, they're not imaginary. It's not fear-mongering. That's what they do. Were we hit on 9/11 or not? Who hit us? We have a whole TSA program. Every time you get on an airplane, you have to be hassled and so forth. Why is that? To protect us from Jews and Christians? Or Islamists and jihadis? Who is it that's trying to assassinate our president? Marxists, madmen, and Islamists based in Tehran. That's reality. That's a fact. Now, we all know of this ilk. We all know what we're dealing with here. A cancer, a poison. We've got Marxists, we've got Islamists, and these anti-American, un-American isolationists who, just like the Islamists and the Marxists, use the American flag, wrap themselves in the American flag, and insist that you agree with them or you're not a patriot. What have they done to support our military? Other than say, don't use our military. Obviously, it is a very serious matter when our military is entered into combat. And we elected a man, Donald Trump, our commander-in-chief, who's well aware of that. We know what he did in his first term. But people forget, in his first term, the same fake MAGA, the same Qatarlsons, among others, trashed him and attacked him. When he took out Soleimani. Who was Soleimani? Soleimani was the chief organizer, strategist for the Iranian military and intelligence attacks around the world. He was the right hand of Khomeini. He was killing our soldiers. He was maiming our soldiers. Trump took him out. And Qatarlson and his ilk attacked Trump, said they would start World War III. Well, is there World War III? And by the way, tell me which Arab country wants to join with Iran. Not one. Maybe Qatar. And maybe if Qatarlson likes Qatar so much, rather than hiding in Maine in his little hovel, maybe he should go there. Well, he'll be fully welcomed. Or maybe he can go to Moscow where he likes the subway system. Just a thought. As he basically lives in hiding. He's a weird, perverse dude. Weird. It's okay. He's unraveling. He's panicking. He's going to a couple of his friends. Some of whom are my friends, I thought. He's going to a couple of his friends. And he relies on a few of these website phony news operations to give him the attention he wants. He's jealous beyond belief of Fox News. He's jealous beyond belief of conservative talk radio. He's jealous beyond belief of Sean Hannity and Ben Shapiro and a host of others. I told you, he's a trust fund preppy. That's what he is. Expects to be hand to success. It's multimillionaires and billionaires that fund his projects. I don't have multimillionaires and billionaires that fund what I do. I live or die by radio ratings. I live or die by TV ratings. That's how I function. That's what we do. My books either sell or they don't sell. It's called the market system. I don't have a billionaire buying my books. I don't have a billionaire setting me up in a studio. I don't have any of that stuff. And I don't want it. He does. He can't survive without millionaires and billionaires, quote unquote, going in business with him. Can he? No, he can't. He's a false prophet. He's also a moron. Don't let that preppy tone, that effeminate tone, substitute for intelligence. How intelligent can you be to be rooting for Iran? It's really quite simple, America. It's really black and white, isn't it? I want you to hear what the president said on the way out when a reporter threw a question to him, Mr. Producer. Nice and loud. Cut 25. Go.
What was your response to Tucker Carlson criticizing you, saying that you were complicit in the war?
I don't know what Tucker Carlson is saying. Let him go get a television network and say it so that people listen.
And quickly, have you spoken to...
What he's saying is he really doesn't have a following other than that little cabal of his and so forth. He works so hard on social media to get his hits. I don't live on social media. We'll post there, but that's not where I live. Now he's attacking the President of the United States as complicit in war because he's backing an ally. He's not sending in 250,000 troops, no. But he's backing an ally, and In Qatarlson's world, if you back an ally against an Islamist Nazi regime that wants to destroy us, you're the problem. No, he's the cancer.
Mark Levin. Making your weekend even better. This is the best of Mark Levin.
What is peace? What is America first? Who decides? Who's pro-war? You know, we'd have a different, very different world today if Kamala Harris were president. She'd be agreeing with Bernie Sanders. She'd be agreeing with Chatsworth Qatarlson. In other words, it would be Iran pretty much free to do whatever it wants, and Israel having to sit there, and the United States having to sit there. I can't think of a great president of the United States who would ever have done that. Not one. Washington? Lincoln? Not one. Reagan? And Donald Trump is one of the greatest presidents in American history. I've told you over and over again over the years, Donald Trump is not an isolationist. He's never even used that word to define who and what he is or believes. He's not an appeaser. He's not a pacifist. Foreign policy is about what? What have I written and what have we discussed here? It's not about ideology. Never wars, quote unquote. Forever wars, quote unquote. Always unexplained. And yet apparently in every circumstance it applies. But it can't. Every circumstance is different. Different countries, different threats. Foreign policy should be looked at not as an ideological matter. That could kill you. As a prudential matter. As President Trump calls it, common sense. You look at the facts. You look at the countries you're dealing with, our experience with them, the world's experience with them, and you apply our principles. Our principles. So what is peace when we're dealing with Iran like this? What is peace? Now, you know that peace is not isolationism when a country keeps threatening to destroy you, tries to assassinate our president, is hell-bent on having nuclear weapons and building tens of thousands of ballistic missiles. We don't have an iron shield. We don't have any defensive system sufficient enough to stop any of this. Some of it, but not enough of it. If we had ballistic missiles raining down on our major cities, you know what we would do about it. And you know quite well that if any country within our hemisphere, let alone on our border, was developing nuclear missiles, that is, nuclear warheads and missiles to fire them at us, we wouldn't tolerate that. So why is it that when it comes to the state of Israel, they're expected to tolerate it? And why is it that when it comes to us, we should tolerate it? Is that America first? That's never been America first under any interpretation or definition of America first, because it's not. Two simple words, America first. Our enemies would love this. They do love it. And who gets to decide? The isolationist radicals, they want you to believe that Donald Trump has deceived you, that he's defied his own statements. We've heard some of this from people on some of our friendliest platforms. The problem is them. That's their position. It's never been Donald Trump's position. He's never conducted himself that way. You see, there's some confusion out there, and it's intentional. That if you're prudent with the use of military force, use it as a last resort, but nonetheless feel the trigger needs to be pulled, you're a warmonger. Over at Mediaite, some guy wrote, Mark's pro-war. I'm not pro-war. I'm anti-terrorists with nuclear weapons who keep saying they're going to use it against us. That's not pro-war. That's pro-American. I tried to have the gentleman come on the program tonight. He refused. Kobe Howell over at Mediaite. He's the big guy there. He said he didn't want to be insulted and so forth. And so, look, Kobe, I'll tell you what. You weren't going to be insulted. I wanted to have a real discussion. I don't understand what you do at Mediaite. All of you. I don't understand why you have these hyper dishonest headlines. I don't understand your mission. And I wanted you to explain it to the American people. Because I see little distance between you and Media Matters. And is that what you're about? Aggregating things, slapping crazy titles on them? And certainly from center left. More left. And I don't understand why you're an apologist for these extremists, effectively, when you give a description of Chatsworth Qatarlson and you leave out completely his anti-Semitism and his promotion of anti-Semites. That's wrong. But you didn't want to have that discussion. It would have been a very professional discussion. No name calling, no insults. I had my producer tell you that. I hope you'll rethink this. I really do. These guys can't do enough stories with me in them. And then every year they put out a list. Most influential media figures, right, Mr. Producer? Well, if I'm not on your list of 65, why do you keep talking about me, writing about me, and reporting about me? Don't you think that's kind of dishonest? I should be right at the top of your stupid list, but it doesn't matter. The vast majority of America doesn't know what Mediaite is if I don't mention it. But it's part and parcel of the problem. We have this site called Axios, which is quite left. And they have a reporter there, Barack Ravin. And he used to be the go-to guy for the Biden administration, for the Biden State Department, them and Politico and a few others, where basically they're scribes for people who leak to them. And in the Trump presidency, the isolationists are leaking like hell. They're relentless. It's almost every day to him, mostly to him. And all these stories, the president denies them, other people deny them, trying to show a terrible rift between Israel and the president or the United States, and on and on and on. And the president put out a statement today saying what they had was false. And there are reports, as I surmised, about who's involved, which officers are involved. But I'm going to keep my powder dry until there's a little bit more meat on that bone. But it is as I expected. I don't leak to the media, by the way, as a footnote. You can ask the media. I don't. If I have something to say, I'll say it on the record. I don't talk a lot to the media. Conservative media, sure, but I'm talking about the corporate media. Why should I? I have a radio show, a TV show, I have a digital show. I can talk to you directly. And I don't believe what I say will be reported accurately anyway. I've spent tens of thousands of hours behind this microphone explaining my views in great detail. I've written 10 best-selling books with thousands of notes on the back, footnotes and endnotes. And this is what I want to discuss from the guy from Mediaite. Why is it that you never report about these things? You really want to know my view? They're spelled out in exquisite detail over the course of over 2 decades. My views are not a secret. I'm here today to express them, to explain them, if necessary, to defend them or alter them. Donald Trump has explained what America First means, and we have really, really outliers, some of whom I think have serious psychological issues, who insist that they get to define or insist on projecting onto Donald Trump what their views are, even though Donald Trump has never embraced them. Of course, he's embraced their support, needs votes, but he's never embraced their views. I told you this, and I've told you this over and over again. Just to keep throwing the word around, peace, 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 doesn't make it so, nor does it mean the people who keep using it are for peace or have any idea what peace is about. If you have a guy next door and he keeps telling you he wants to kill you, and he supports and funds individuals who've killed family members of yours, and he's telling you he wants to get a weapon strong enough to blow your house up, you just sit there and say peace means just sitting on my ass and watching this and listening to this? Of course not. That's not peace. Iran with nuclear weapons and now ballistic missiles, we've learned about, that's not peace. The question is, how do you ensure peace? How do you ensure that the United States is never hit by these weapons? You're talking about a 7th century barbarian police state, a primitive regime that believes God, their God, requires them to kill us, as you'll learn when you read my book on power. Now, we have a brain for a reason. We take into consideration what we know, what we've experienced, what we've seen, what we know about the death cult. That's called knowledge. That's what human beings use to make decisions. Those who promote this radical isolationist position, all they keep doing is yelling, no more war. Does the enemy agree with them? I mean, what is this, 3rd grade? And yet their conduct gave aid and comfort, I believe, to the Iranian regime. They thought they could hang on listening to these people. They were undermining the president's message. He's making the decision. You know, ladies and gentlemen, it's one thing to have a disagreement with President Trump. It's one thing to have been never Trump. You know, it's another thing to have been an aggressive primary where names are thrown around and so forth and so on. Marco Rubio, J.D. Vance, not even in the primary. He used some horrible things about Trump and so forth and so on. And you're done. It's over. And you move on. And the president has brought people like this into his cabinet, into his confidence. That's the way it works. That's the way it worked when Ronald Reagan got elected, and I worked for him. And I remember all these Bush guys attacking him left and right, left and right. What did he do? He appointed the top Bush guy, George H.W. Bush, as vice president, just as he appointed J.D. Vance, his vice president, despite being called Hitler and so forth. That's not what I'm talking about. And you have a patriotic, American-loving, smart, historic, iconic president, a commander-in-chief who's trying to sort through complicated issues. Of course you can give your opinion. I do. Of course you can disagree. I have. That's the way it is. It's a democracy. We have free speech. But when you leak against him, you try and handicap him, you try and undo his policies, you viciously attack people who may have a different viewpoint than you do, even though you're the outlier and they're not. When you claim to represent the 77 million people who voted for him, when 76 million of them don't even know who the hell you are, you're destructive. You're dangerous. You can try and influence policy using argumentation, using persuasion, facts, evidence. Great. We should all do that. I do that all the time, right here and behind the microphone. But when you literally try and damage him, especially in a wartime footing, that's not normal. That's not normal at all. That's a disgrace. And that's what they're doing. No, I'm not for war. I'm for peace. I'm against the Islamo-Nazi regime that has slaughtered over 600 Americans, thousands of casualties, Enough is enough.
Mark Levin. You're listening to the best of Mark Levin.
Look, no re-engaging with Iran. They either surrender or they don't. They either surrender all the material. We go in there and we destroy it all. Or this keeps up. And ladies and gentlemen, the issue shouldn't be, will we get involved to help Israel? The issue should be, will we get involved to help ourselves, for God's sakes? Even the nature of the discussion is absurd. Ami Kozak is a comedian. Now, unlike the isolationist comedians who claim to be historians and are clearly anti-Semites, he's none of those things. He's a comedian. He does a little bit on the moral clarity and insight of Chatsworth Qatarlson. And he does a good imitation, I thought. And I think it's time for a little bit of levity, don't you? So here it is. Listen up, turn up the volume, have a good laugh. Go.
How do you feel about Israel versus the Iranian regime?
I mean, I've always said that the Iranian regime is evil and needs to be destroyed. There's no question. And what I think they're doing now, Israel at least, is what they're doing is appalling.
What?
I certainly don't want to be involved in it. But it's, like, what are we doing? And so, I mean, I have no ill will against anyone. I don't hate anyone. I have no biases. All of mine are out in the open. I just feel that, I don't hate anyone. I have no animus towards anyone. But I certainly despise Ben Shapiro, Daily Wire, the neocons, Mark Dubowitz, Mark Levin, all my old colleagues at Fox, my old self.
Your old self?
Yes, I hate my old self. I hate myself completely. I hate myself yesterday. I love myself today. I don't know how I'll feel about myself tomorrow, but that's my business. Who knows? Who knows how they're going to feel about themselves? When I look in the mirror, I don't even know who that is, actually. I don't know what I'm seeing. I don't know who you are.
What?
Are we in a simulation? It certainly feels that way.
A simulation?
And I love it. But I also despise it. And
I'm sorry, this doesn't make any sense.
I'm sorry, but who are you to tell me that I'm incoherent?
But you are being very incoherent.
I know. It's working.
So who do you want to win?
Russia.
Russia? What? Oh.
Look, people imitate me all the time. It's funny. But this is funny and very realistic, I think. Very good comedian, Ami Kozak. We will post this for your entertainment. I think we did already. Should you be interested in taking a listen. President of the United States says, no ceasefire. Can you folks tell me how many times in war, when a country's losing, it can call for a ceasefire, or it can get other countries to pressure a country to pressure the winning country, the country that's winning, to stop? Like this is some kind of baseball game? Those of us who don't want forever wars, this is the problem. That creates a forever war, doesn't it? This is an enemy that needs to be fundamentally and utterly defeated, whether Tulsi Gabbard likes it or not. And that's what we did with the Japanese. That's what we did with Germany. That's what we did with Italy. The Greatest Generation. It wasn't a forever war. It lasted 4.5 years. And that was that. Shouldn't we learn from that experience? You don't have a terrorist regime that threatens to destroy your people, caught red-handed trying to murder our president. You've got them on their back. The Israelis have them on their back. The Israelis have done this with support from us. But they're the point of the spear. They're the ones that have to deal with the ballistic missiles. and so forth and so on. Have an opportunity like this where after all this time the Israelis control the air, they've taken out most of the senior military personnel. Khomeini's hiding, wetting his depends in his robe. And then say, you know what, time out? Time out? And then we get the question, well, what happens afterwards? Chaos will ensue. This is just asinine. Nobody knows what's going to happen afterwards. We're not creating a democracy project. That's the point. But the Iranian people, more specifically the Persians, they will decide what they want. You know, when you're fighting a war, it's not hermetically sealed. You don't know every consequence that's going to result. But there are consequences that will result that are more important than anything else, like destroying a regime that wants to destroy you with nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles. That is righteous. What the Israelis are doing is righteous. What the Israelis are doing, the entire world will benefit from. The entire world. Now, we have members of Congress who are working hard to undermine the commander-in-chief. We have members of Congress who are trying to prevent Israel, and hence the West, from defeating the primitives from the 7th century. They are Democrats and a handful of Republicans. They are dishonorable. They try to cloak themselves in the language of the Constitution. They are grotesque, actually. I've gone through this discussion before. I just went and looked, Mr. Producer. I've dealt with the War Powers Act before, have I not? Folks, you can go online and you can see my comments before. See, there's a treaty clause in the Constitution which I strongly support. It's cut and dry. It's clear. We know the whole history behind it. It's in the Constitution. That if there had been or is some kind of a deal, to me, it should go to Congress. Specifically, it should go to the Senate under the treaty provision. But we have provisions in our Constitution, the President of the United States, the Commander-in-Chief. Now, when you look at Madison's notes and you understand the debate that took place, they said one person needs to be in charge of war. One. And so they created the President of the United States, and they said he's the Commander-in-Chief. There was debate about Congress's participation. There was debate on whether Congress had to be part of the military decision-making, and they decided no, it's just too unruly. And plus, if you have an urgency, it'll never get addressed. There's also a declaration of war provision in the Constitution, where Congress passes declaration of wars, typically at the request of the Commander-in-Chief. So you have the declaration of war provision, and you have the Commander-in-Chief provision. Where is there any authority whatsoever for Congress to pass the War Powers Act, limiting the power of the president? Well, Mark, is he a king? And then people start to sound like all the Marxist Islamists out there. Well, there's a third provision of the Constitution, and what is that? It's the spending clause. Congress has the power to deny funds, if it wishes, for any military action. Doesn't have to be limited to a full-blown war. And Congress has done that before. That's how we eventually lost in Vietnam. Congress cut off the funds by a veto-proof majority. Gerald Ford vetoed it, and he lost. Then we had the boat people and all the other horrors that followed from that. But Congress exercised its spending clause power. That is the check on the president, not the War Powers Act. They can't pass a statute and say, look at us, we've amended the Constitution. I don't care what any court says, let alone the Supreme Court. I don't even believe it's been fully challenged in that regard. So now we have the so-called Tom Massey, Mr. Constitution, waving around the War Powers Act. I'm guessing Mike Lee will get in on it, some of the others, Rand Paul. Look at this, we have a War Powers Act, 1973. That's right, 1973. It's not in the Constitution. You can't alter the balance of power and the various authorities given to one branch or another with a statute, whether you want to or not, whether you claim to be a constitutionalist or not. And so the use of the War Powers Act is nothing more than to try and prevent Donald Trump, who's been very judicious, very prudential, very careful about what he's doing. To take steps now, if should he choose to do so, to help destroy these nuclear programs, these nuclear sites. You're going to sit around and wait till what? Are they on vacation? I don't even know. They can't even get a damn budget with tax cuts passed. We want power over war. You don't get power over this. We have the right to declare war. You do. But your power to, quote unquote, challenge a war or end a war is the power of the purse, not the power of declaration. The declaration is an affirmative act. And every military campaign is not a full-on war. It's not a full-on war. So now they're going to cite what is an illegitimate statute, an unconstitutional statute that steals power from the commander-in-chief, gives it to Congress while these clowns sit on their ass and debate what? Unlike the treaty provision, which is quite specific. Quite specific. And so these radical libertarians, these isolationists, throwing in with the Democrats like Tlaib and Omar and the rest of the hate America crowd, all they're trying to do is obstruct, undermine, handicap. Because if the President of the United States was truly bound by every decision when it comes to national security that involves a battle or more than one battle, to get approval from Congress, then we'd never be safe. Ever. And then the whole point of a commander-in-chief would be irrelevant. Utterly irrelevant. The framers didn't say we have a commander-in-chief and hopefully one day they'll pass a War Powers Act to limit him. It doesn't say that. Congress shall declare war. But every military campaign is not a war. It's not a full-on war. I'm sorry if people are upset about this. That's the way it is. It's now we have, the Marxists trying to seize power from the president through their courts. Now we have the radical libertarian isolationists throwing in with Bernie Sanders and AOC and that ilk, trying to undermine and seize power from the power of the presidency. So my advice to Mr. Massey, my advice to Mr. Paul, and Manny Moe and Jack, and the Marx brothers and everybody else in Congress, stop pissing up the wrong tree. If you think you can really stop the president, and you really want to stop the president, then use the power of the purse. Here's their problem. The president has to sign it, and they don't have a veto-proof number on this, so they want to skirt it. That's why, I'm just being honest with you. They want to accuse him of, you violated the War Powers Act, which he should. By the way, every president should, in my humble opinion. This is another straw man, another fig leaf to what they really intend here. Now, can you remember, ladies and gentlemen, the last time we've discussed the War Powers Act, the War Power Act? Can you? It's not under a Democrat, is it? When we were funding Ukraine, did that require the triggering of the War Power Act? If it did, I didn't hear anybody talk about it. Did you? Now, unlike most people, I guess, I support supporting Ukraine. That's not my question. Whether you support Ukraine or not, or whether you I mean, unbelievably, support Putin. That's not my question. You never heard anybody talk about the War Powers Act on the Democrat side. I don't remember Massey talking about it. Maybe he did. But he's such an irrelevant squeak when he speaks, it doesn't really matter.
Mark Levin. The Great One makes your weekend even better. This is the best of Mark Levin.
This is his fella, Harry Hinton, the CNN chief data analyst. This guy makes boring polls sound exciting, fabulous, incredible. They're lucky to have him. I think he's the only guy over there worth having, other than the conservative, and I don't mean to be rude, whose name I can't remember. What is his name? Scott Jennings. Sorry there, Scott. I want you to listen to Harry Hinton. This is very important to you, I'm sure. CNN chief data analyst. Cut 17, go.
And overall, I feel like there's more support for Donald Trump's positions than is comically acknowledged. Oppose Iran getting a nuclear weapon. I mean, look at this. 79% of adults agree on that. They agree with Donald Trump. Iran cannot get a nuclear weapon. 83% of Republicans, 79% of independents, 79% of Democrats. When you get 79% of Democrats and 83% of Republicans agreeing on anything, you know that that position is the very clear majority in this country. And so the American public is with Donald Trump. They definitely oppose Iran getting nuclear weapons.
So this is a nuance here, but, Trump and Netanyahu both arguing that Iran is close to being capable of making a nuclear weapon. If that is the case, what is the feeling of Americans as to whether the United States should get involved in this conflict?
Right. If you buy Donald Trump's theory of the case, and I think that's important to note, this is polling from April. If Iran's trying to make a nuclear weapon, look at this. Overall, you get the slight plurality. I mean, it's within the margin of error, but the slight plurality of Americans actually favor U.S. airstrikes compared to 47% opposing it. Now, here's the other nugget I'll note, right? There's been a lot of talk online and on social media and in podcasts of a divide within the Republican ranks. But here on this question, if Iran's trying to make a nuclear weapon, look at that. 69% of Republicans, the clear vast majority of Republicans, favor U.S. airstrikes on Iran, on their nuclear facilities. But there is this substantial minority, 27%, who oppose such an idea. So it's not surprising you're hearing those other voices besides Donald Trump out there. There are plenty of them in the Republican ranks who oppose the U.S. striking Iran if they're trying to make a nuclear weapon. But the clear majority of Republicans are with Donald Trump. If, in fact, Iran is trying to make nuclear weapons, they do, in fact, potentially favor U.S. airstrikes.
So, to cut through all this, and he does a tremendous job, 69% of Americans, so 69% of Republicans, 7 out of 10 Republicans believe that the U.S. should hit our bombers, Iran's nuclear sites. 70%, 69%. And in terms of making sure that Iran does not have nuclear weapons, incredible. 83% of Republicans, 79% of Democrats, 79% of independents. So you see, ladies and gentlemen, the isolationists, I've been telling you this for week after week after week. It's a small cabal. That's what it is. They have platforms. Then they are, those platforms, when they make their outrageous statements and do their outrageous things, they are cycled through entities like Mediaite and the Drudge Report and so forth and so on to try and give them a voice. Why? Because they want you to believe that the Republican Party is like the Democrat Party when it comes to national security, when it comes to taking out nuclear warheads, or potentially when it comes to Israel. It's all a lie, as again I've been trying to say. Now, this battle over the last month with me and the isolationists has exposed them. They're feckless. They're paper tigers. That's what they are. And then they turn on Donald Trump. And then Donald Trump turns on them. And then they have a problem. A big problem. But red-blooded Americans are not isolationists, appeasers, pacifists. We're people with common sense. People who believe you look at a situation, you figure out who the good guys are and the bad guys are. If you can help, we help. It's not about a forever war. It's not about World War III. The American people aren't buying any of this crap. And they know Iran. We know Iran. They've been with us for 47 years, this regime. They've killed Americans, American soldiers. They've tried to assassinate our president. What's getting interesting now, you might recall a couple of weeks ago, ladies and gentlemen, when I was dealing with Qatarlson, who really is a paper tiger, absolute lightweight, and his following is an inch deep. When I was dealing with him, you'll notice that Politico, Rachel Bade come to his defense. Then the Independent came to his defense. Then Mediocreite came to his defense. Then the Daily Bestiality came to his defense. Then the Huffington all these outlier media entrails. Same left-wing ideologues, same Democrat mouthpieces and so forth and so on in terms of their mindset. They question the intelligence about the nuclear sites. They question the intelligence about the attempts to assassinate Donald Trump. We actually have a case at the Department of Justice. I believe it was started in the Biden administration. So just like Biden isn't as dumb as he sounds and seems and walks and talks. No. So the same media and their entrails, except this time with the isolationists, want you to believe Iran's not a threat. They don't have nukes. Look at them. What exactly is Israel bombing? Civilian energy sites? We all know. We see it. We hear it, just like we did with Biden, just like we did with the Hunter laptop. They're pulling the same thing, except this time they have the isolationists, almost as a fifth column, as a fifth column in this country, joining with them. They're ideological. They're ideological knuckleheads. We're going to have a guest on in the second hour who's going to explain what their surveys found. Very thorough, very comprehensive surveys, very similar to the CNN poll, very similar. Donald Trump's position has been known from day one. We should be supporting what he's trying to do now. We should be supporting the Prime Minister of Israel. We should be supporting the Israeli military. We should be supporting our military. We should encourage them to work as closely together as possible to wipe out this enemy, their nuclear weapons, in which they want to kill us. That's the bottom line. I understand why Tlaib and Omar and AOC and Sanders and the rest of the Marxist Islamists are not with us. But these people who've turned on us, these isolationists with their podcasts and their subscription services and all the rest, hell to them. When the rubber hit the road, they're on the side of the enemy. They'll say they're not, but they are. They're on the side of Tlaib. They're on the side of Bernie Sanders. They sound like Bernie Sanders. And I don't want to hear this stuff. I guess we will, but I don't want to hear it. I support Israel, but I oppose war. Well, good for you. The problem for Israel is they're under attack constantly on all sides. So you may oppose war sitting here in the United States. That's a wonderful thing. But when you're under attack in direct ways and terrorist ways and other ways, and you have been for 47 years by the same primitive, barbarian, 7th century Islamists, you can't just preach. You know, I support Israel, but I oppose war. I see General Michael Flynn. General Michael Flynn has made the point. I'm against stupid wars, but I'm not necessarily against war. And when the state of Israel is under attack, directly and indirectly, I support, if necessary, a war to stop it. But 80% of the American people, 83%, agree with you and me and the president. 83%. And 69% of Republicans believe that the United States should participate in blowing out these nuclear sites. Completely different than what you've been hearing on cable, completely different than what you've been hearing from podcasters, many of them, some on conservative talk radio. Again, I will tell you for the 5,000th time, Rush always told me, respect your audience, respect their intelligence. When I come behind here, I'm talking to you. I'm not talking to the entrails. I'm not talking to the isolation. I'm talking to you. And you know I give you the truth. I give you the information I have. You don't necessarily have to agree with me. That's okay. That's not the point. But I'll give you the best information I have. That's not what you get in American media. That's not what you get from Mediaite and the Drudge Report, Politico, and Axios. Axios is the favorite leaking point of the isolationists who side with Hamas in some instances, but clearly side with the Iranian government. You can't say, no, we can't use military action, or we can't back up the Israelis who are using military action to take out the nuclear weapons there, and then say you're for Israel, but you're not for Iran. No, you're for Iran. It's a practical matter. Putting aside words, as a practical matter, you're for Iran. Just have the guts to say so. Just have the guts to say so. Now, Ted Cruz was a great man, great patriot. I've known him for decades. What you see is what you get. He hasn't gone from being a liberal to a libertarian to a neocon to a conservative and then an isolationist. His head is screwed on tight. His head is screwed on tight. I'm going to play for you a little bit later a few short clips of him and Qatarlson, Chatsworth Qatarlson. I noticed over at Mediaite, they took a Qatarlson clip because Qatarlson was trying to get in front of this disaster where Cruz ripped him a new one and twisted it with a headline. Questions being, how many people live in Iran? Why does that matter? You're a senator and you don't even know. What's the ethnic makeup of Iran? You know, Shia, you don't know and you're a senator? That's the kind of stupidity. And Mediaite thought that was great. Why? Because Mediaite is in the camp of the isolationists. Anything to attack Trump or to attack conservatives. They are in the camp of the isolationists. We tried to get one of the gentlemen on this program. What's his name again, Rich? I don't know. Colby Hall. I was going to have a professional discussion with him, as I told you yesterday. I wanted to ask him, what is your mission? I'm just curious. What do you do? These hyper ridiculous headlines that are aimed at getting clicks, these distorted stories. I see your staff. We've taken a little look at some of their backgrounds in the public record. Mostly are hardcore leftists, white male hardcore leftists. What is your mission? How are you any different than Media Matters? But he wouldn't come on. We tried to get the reporter for Politico who lied about me. She wouldn't answer. We tried to get the reporter for The Independent. She lied too. She wouldn't come on. We've tried to get the Marxist Islamists on this program. They won't come on. We've tried to get the Stalinists on this program. They won't come on. I don't need to debate other conservatives. I mean, I don't mind, but I don't need to give them a whoop ass. That's not what I'm looking at. I'm looking at these people who I believe undermine our nation. But they won't come on. They're safe, you see, behind their press people, behind their computers, and so forth and so on.
Mark Levin. We're giving you nothing but the best of Mark Levin.
No, audience, this is going to be funny. Okay, reporters, turn on your recording devices. See, the way it works here is whatever I say, they're going to try and create a fight between President Trump and me. Problem is, President Trump and I already know this. The fact is, ladies and gentlemen, that whether it's 2 hours from now, 2 days from now, or 2 weeks from now, Iran's not going to go away on its own. The Israelis are going to put it away by itself, if they can, with that Fordo nuclear site. They'll put it away with our assistance. At some point, I suppose. Or it's not going to go away. It's not going to go away. That's the truth. You've got a combination of radical Democrats and fifth-columnists, isolationists in this country, who actually have no, and I repeat, no idea how to deal with this, except dig a hole and put your head in it and hope for the best. If you don't take military action against Iran, then Iran exists. If you don't take military action against Iran, then they will increase their ballistic missile inventory to the tens of thousands. If you don't take military action against Tehran, they're going to have intercontinental ballistic missiles. If you don't take military action against Iran, they're going to have nuclear warheads. Combine that with their public statements, and you have a death threat against the American civilization, and of course Israel. Now there's one lowlife out there who says Benjamin Netanyahu is the problem, that he's playing us. And so I guess that means he's playing Donald Trump. Donald Trump's not going to be played by anybody, and neither is Benjamin Netanyahu. It's about time these people with a low IQ and a small vocabulary try and grow up and act like adults. But they won't. They're stuck. They've got their platforms, and that's the way it is. Moreover, it is amazing to me that on an issue that is so clear between good and evil, that they're having a problem with their own morality. One of them is so busy walking a fine line that everybody's lost respect for him. Another one has effectively thrown in with the enemy, rarely ever condemning the Islamo-Nazi who runs Iran. And despite the polls that are out, whether it's CNN, whether it is the Reagan Institute, all these major polls, although one site went to an online poll and tried to use that to support their position, it just shows you they have nothing substantive, nothing, no strategy, zero. And for them, everything is Afghanistan and Iraq. They're ignoramuses. Everything is not Afghanistan and Iraq. Everything is not nation building. This is called self-defense. Peace. Self-defense. Iran struck Israel through its proxies. Iran has killed hundreds of Americans and maimed thousands. They have blood, American blood, on their hands. Apparently this doesn't move the fifth column isolationists. Apparently the Democrats are okay with this. In fact, they use their deaths to say, what do we want, more deaths? As the very perpetrator of those deaths has been building nuclear weapons. And they denied they were building nuclear weapons. And now Radcliffe, the head of the CIA, says they're on the 1 yard line. It takes almost nothing for them to get a touchdown. So we're supposed to disbelieve Radcliffe, disbelieve the IAEA, disbelieve the Austrians, disbelieve everybody, but believe them. These are dangerous know-nothings. Whether it's 2 weeks, next week, Saturday, Sunday, next Wednesday, this problem doesn't go away. So we'll negotiate another 2 weeks. With whom, I don't know. The supreme Islamo-Nazi, according to the press, we have all these quotes, has told us to screw off. He's not interested. So I guess somebody else is going to negotiate. I don't know who. I don't know who they represent. Could be interesting. I don't know what kind of deal can be made. Unconditional surrender. What's to negotiate? It's a 3-word surrender, Mr. Producer. We surrender unconditionally. Do you have to do a whole set of negotiations for that? Does that take 2 weeks? Does that take 2 minutes? I'm only basing my comments on what I'm reading in the newspaper and online, and what people are saying who are supposed to be in the know. Meanwhile, during this 2-week period, ballistic missiles will continue to rain down on the Israeli people. Yesterday, last evening actually, they aimed one of those missiles at a hospital. They said, oh, sorry, we were aiming it at an intelligence facility. No, they weren't. They aimed it at a hospital. And they hit it. A direct hit. This is a hospital, one of the biggest in southern Israel, that serves Muslims, Christians, Jews, Bedouins and Arabs, Druze, anybody who comes through the door. Anybody. And they hit it. By the grace of God, the part of the hospital that was hit, by the grace of God, the part of the hospital that was hit, there was nobody there because they had moved the people out because they were doing work. That's God's will. What about the fact that Israel and the United States, this is known, I'm not breaking any rules, are running out of interceptor missiles? How much longer can that go on? How much longer can even a 90% or an 80% accuracy rate with a 10 to 20% inaccuracy rate go on? I noticed that the Democrats and the fifth column isolationists rarely ever talk about the suffering of the Israeli people. Nor do they condemn the supreme Islamist Nazi as much as they condemn Benjamin Netanyahu. It's shocking what's going on. Shocking. And the level of Jew hatred and anti-Semitism promoted by websites that continue to give voice to these individuals who represent a tiny percentage of the people, whether it's Mediaite, the Drudge Report, or some of the others, is grotesque. The people who go on comment on that Mediaite platform, and they own the platform, sound like Klansmen and neo-Nazis. Just a disgrace what Dan Abrams has created over there. A disgrace. And then when they write articles, they dip into the comments section and they try to pick comments that they feel will create the story that they're manufacturing. And you wonder why people hate the press. The fact is that you and I stand with 84% of the Republicans. You and I stand with 80% of the American people. Real surveys, real polls, not YouGov, that's used by one of these websites to defend the indefensible. Tell me where to go to find, and I'll put a link up. Tell me where to go to find the isolationist fifth column Democrat Party resolution to the Iran problem. You can't find it. And not only that, they don't think it's a problem. That's why the American people reject them. Whether it's MAGA, the Tea Party, the Reagan Revolution, all of us, the American people reject this. So 2 weeks. Maybe we'll have the greatest deal in the history of humankind. But when 2 weeks are up, if we don't, will the fifth column isolationists, will the Chatsworth Qatarlsons and his ilk, will they still oppose taking action? And what makes the next 2 weeks so magical? What about the last 3 months? The fact is the Iranian regime is on its back. It's hanging by its fingernails. It's about to be eliminated. And so successful have the Israelis been, and let's not play games. The United States has provided some defensive support. But those are Israelis going into Iran, attacking these locations. That was Israeli intelligence taking out the highest levels of their military, taking out the top senior nuclear scientists. They're the ones who are prepared to take out Khomeini. They're the ones going after the nuclear sites. They have no compunction about it all because they know that this is a battle between 7th century primitive barbarians, that regime, and the free world and modernity, and whether we survive or they survive. They understand the mindset of the Islamists, and Zuhdi Jasser will be back next hour to explain it yet again. So 2 weeks? Okay, 2 weeks. 2 weeks. And then can we assume the rubber hits the road? Or will the same reprobates, fifth-column isolationists, gearing up for a fight, lobbying and pressuring and all the rest, will they be back at it? Yes, they will. Because these people are ideologues. They're numbskulls. They're dangerous. That's what they are. And worse, in some cases. It's Netanyahu's fault. Gee, we haven't heard that before. It's the Israelis. It's their fault. Oh, okay. It's the American warmongers and neocons. It's never the terrorists. Have you noticed? It's never the Iranian regime. Just like Putin. It's never Putin. It's Zelensky. Not Putin. Zelensky. The communist Chinese are watching this. The Russians are watching this. The North Koreans are watching this. They're watching it. And so far, they're seeing the Israelis kicking the ass of the Iranian military. It's defeated the Iranian military. It defeated it in 48 hours. That's what it did. It defeated it. Now it's an issue of taking out all these nuclear sites. And they're asking, I assume, I don't know firsthand, help on this Fordo or whatever it's called site. They'll do whatever they can on their own. They don't have the bunker buster and the bomber in order to deliver it. Honestly, ladies and gentlemen, is that not the least we can do? Is that not the least we can do? They've been carrying the load here. They've carried the load with Hamas and Hezbollah. They're carrying the load with Iran. Of course we're providing them with weapons, although they were denied in the last administration. Why wouldn't we? But it's their flesh and blood on the line. Well, it's not our problem. How stupid. Over and over again, intercontinental ballistic missiles with nuclear warheads. Do these people really? You know who they sound like? They sound like the primitive barbarians that run Iran. They're slow learners. Worst of all, they're ideologues.